afternoon. Thank you for joining us today for another live session with PRPOI. I'm your host, Tarunjeet Rattan, and I'm delighted to welcome you to this episode on a conversation that I feel is very relevant to our changing media landscape. While we have all spoken endlessly about the growth of digital and new mediums, have you noticed how legacy media has steadily innovated in this space? Some wonderful innovations that merge decades of experience, clarity of news into mediums that resonate with a younger target audience. Today, we speak to leaders from the sector who will gaze with us into the crystal ball and share with us what the future holds for the media and the innovations that have caught the viewer's attention. Before I introduce the panelists for this discussion, I would like to give a shout out to our fabulous content curators, Sonali Sokhal, Pooja Trehan, who helped put this together, and a special shout out to Agency Reporter, our exclusive media partner for the session. Let me introduce the panelists without much ado. We have with us first Radhika Bhirani. Let me add Radhika on. Hi, Radhika.
Hi, Tarunjeet. Hi. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. Radhika is currently the head of content at HealthShots, a digital health and wellness platform for women powered by Hindustan Times. With an experience of 14 years in the media world, she began her journey with news agency Indo-Asian News Service, as all of us know it as IANS, where she grew on to lead the cinema and lifestyle vertical. Her credentials also include a stint with HT City, after which she turned into an independent contributor with bylines in magazines and international news agencies. Her step into the world of health and digital is a new challenge up her sleeve as well. So, thank you so much for taking out the time for joining us today.
Not a problem at all. My pleasure.
Awesome. So, I'm going to add our second panelist. Our second panelist for the day is Anil Thomas. Welcome, Anil.
Good afternoon, Tarun.
Thank you so much for joining us. Anil is currently working as a senior anchor cum correspondent at DD News. He has worked with a wide variety of news channels, starting from Sahara News to Aaj Tak, Headlines Today, and then with DD News. He has over 21 years of TV journalism experience and specializes in sports, politics, and economy. By the way, he's covered 5 Cricket World Cups, 5 Olympics, 5 Asian Games, and has traveled across the globe to cover sports live for the national broadcaster. He's also a core team member of 2 national TV channel launch teams and has been with them for over 18 years. Thank you so much, Anil, for taking out the time to be with us here today.
My pleasure.
Yeah. Before we get started on the discussion, I'm sure our audience would love to know what got you into journalism first. Radhika, can I ask you to address that first?
So, Tarun, to put it very simply, my love for writing is what got me into journalism in the first place, and also the fact that I love conversations. So, I think you put both of them together, and you have a decent storyteller. I think so. Yeah, I mean that was my first pull into journalism. It was not that growing up I thought that I'm going to go into the field, break lots of big stories, but it's purely out of the love for writing and conversations.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the key requirements for being a great storyteller. Anil, what about you? What got you into journalism?
Well, I think the passion for sports in particular, because I was a sportsman myself, and then, I wanted to watch the action live and close, and if I had to do that, there were 2 opportunities. Either I become a player at the top level, which I felt I lacked the talent. So the very next obvious option that I had before me was either to become a sports journalist or to be associated with sports administration. Since sports administration at the point of time was not a great avenue in India, or still was unexplored, I thought sports journalism could be one of the best ways. And I think it's been a blessing in disguise, but then I've enjoyed this journey that's been now almost over 21 years.
Yeah, I can see that with over 5 Olympics and Asian Games and World Cups that you've covered, you've pretty much met your goal.
Well, exactly. It's been one fun journey that I have enjoyed. If you enjoy what you're doing, you still get some kick out of it. Even in today's times, if you tell me that, okay, in October, you've got a next T20 World Cup coming up, there is still some kick to go there and enjoy it even after 21 years.
Wow. That's really keeping the passion alive. It's brilliant. So, both of you have been in the industry for some time. Can you share with us one key observation that has stuck with you on the evolution of the media industry in India specifically? Radhika, would you want to go first?
I'll let Anil go first because he
Well,
has more experience and he's seen more of the evolution.
Okay.
Purely from a perspective of evolution, what exactly, say maybe two elections before 2014, or even for that matter 2004 elections, when we were pretty raw, or when we were as trainees, even in 2000, when the elections 1999 elections that took place, elections was very much focused very much on one medium, that was TV news, and also print. The balance was between TV and print, but that slowly has changed. If you see the last two elections, 2014, 2019, and the next one in 2024, could be very much a fight where TV is going to lose a lot of space and it's going to be taken over by digital medium. It's going to be, the evolution is very much present there, especially social media space. 2019 elections, almost, if you see, almost 40% of the crowd shift is clearly evident from TV to the social media space. And I think 2024 will be election to watch out for, where TV will lose a lot of ground, and it could be the other mediums that could grab that opportunity big time, because people are moving. You don't have the time now to sit back and enjoy those TV screens, where it happened, say in the early 2000, till 2010, 2012, you could have more of television that way. But that particular enjoyment of news, or that particular enjoyment of getting information, is slowly changing, and that could be the big step away, or the big evolution that I have seen in this medium.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Right,
Radhika,
I'd,
what's your view?
I'd agree. I mean, consumption patterns have changed a lot, which is what is also driven how we are delivering news. So I think that is one of the key changes. I mean, obviously, with times, with the past 2 years, what it has done to our reality, we've seen how consumption patterns have completely been altered. So
Right.
I think that is a major change, and we are all scrambling to uh, deliver there.
No, absolutely. See, for the longest amount of time, I think while digital media has been predicting the doom or the death of traditional media, and traditional media has been pretty much talking about this being the new kid on the block, and possibly it'll take a long time for it to catch up. But somewhere the twain has met. Yeah. And I think over the last 4 or 5 years, there has been a conscious move by legacy media to actually move into the digital space, or look at newer programming, or look at, interesting initiatives that will catch the attention of the viewer. In your opinion, what how do you see this evolving, right? And what was the exact point or the exact moment in history of media evolution that you can count, that it actually said that, okay, that you can pinpoint and say, okay, this was when legacy media started taking these transformations as important, orienting their attention? Anil?
Well, one particular instance that comes to my mind immediately, especially the 2000 Kumbh Mela, where the first time when in India, especially an event in India, which was telecast live on ZTV then, because ZTV and Star Plus were the two new existing news creators or content creators then in 2000. So when that particular event went live, and suddenly we realized that there is a big window, that because the legacy media, when you say, I would put Doordarshan very much in that league. Doordarshan didn't believe in anything live. Live was all choreographed live. Events that were very much managed, like Republic Day, Independence Day. Nothing that we thought could be possible. But clearly that was the stepping stone in that particular Kumbh Mela. When everything went live, you could suddenly see, okay, this is how it's done. You could create a theater, especially of an event that is live, and that could catch the attention of viewers sitting in their drawing rooms. Or people didn't have to go to the Ganges to see it. You could wake up in the morning at 4 o'clock. You could see that particular event live. And I think that particular feature of live television has just evolved. If you see with passing channels, as they're taking on that bait further, bringing everything live. Even for a very large extent, if you see Republic TV in today's times, it's that moment of creating the theater very much live into your drawing rooms, where you're sitting and enjoying that. And that particular, even in Hindi as well as English television, that's moved a bit, a great way, especially when it comes to bringing those live moments into your drawing rooms. And that's got people's attention, because no longer to catch a particular, except for sports, no other moment in, any part of history that you see post that particular event in India. You clearly had a feeling that you could catch this particular event live on television, and that could be one of the best way out, especially in these times that we are all facing. You don't get an opportunity. We've all wasted that particular opportunity where we taken almost life for granted. We could go and catch an event live. I think we all wasted that, those golden opportunities that we had, the last 2 years. We are almost, lock, stock, and barrel caught somewhere, in some
True, true.
particular apartment or office that we are all working in. And I think it's a great opportunity once again that we look at purely live events. We've got a live event that's coming up, the Republic Day preparations. So on ground it's very difficult to, because what happens, the expectations increase purely in terms of the thrill that we're going to give to the audience, especially with regards to what new can be brought about. How do we get about getting those clearances, because it's not easy getting clearances, especially on technology that needs to be brought to the, especially bringing on, say, a drone camera for a Republic Day parade. You need clearances from many sectors, actually the defense, the MEA clearing, those kind of clearances needed. So it's not
Right.
easy to get it, but then the process slowly begins, where you could also think of making it larger than life and making it enjoyable for the viewers. And I think that's the way forward, especially if television has to survive. It has to make things interesting for the people to watch, and interesting purely in terms of more infotainment added to it, and also with information equally galore there available for people to enjoy and make full use of.
Absolutely, absolutely. Radhika?
I think for me, since I've been from a writing background, so I started. I think the shift started even before I came into the industry. So, but largely, say around 10 to 12 years ago is when I'll say when a whole lot of websites started coming in for us, a lot of niche websites. Since I was covering, say, cinema lifestyle, it was about 10, 12 years ago that I started seeing absolutely niche content websites coming in, catering to again a lot of live things, a lot of paparazzi thing. I think that completely changed the way things were covered, at least in the cinema and lifestyle space that I have largely covered throughout my career. And that has continued to now shape what we consume and deliver. So,
Absolutely. But I think for the longest amount of time, management or editorial teams internally would always prioritize a television live or a byline written story in print rather than it being online, right? So online was always treated as a stepchild of the original family. And I think now they're pretty much taking it seriously and trying to make a go at it. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, I think online media is one step ahead than what television is. We do things live, but then we get live feedback on where we went wrong. Because whenever we go right, it's never mentioned. But as soon as we go wrong, there is a tweet that's being posted somewhere, and there you get the call. In the middle of life, you get a call. This is what happened. I said, nobody missed it.
Absolutely.
Nobody saw it. It's there in the online space. Look at Twitter. There is a clip with regards to that. So that's the power of online media in today's times. Especially when there is a mistake or when there is a flaw. I would say it's very much hands on. It helps us also. It helps us stay on our toes, especially in these kind of situations, because there was a time when such things could be taken. There was a bit of, in purely in terms of approach, the approach is much more serious, and everybody is on their toes thanks to social media.
Absolutely. It reminds me of a scene from the series called Newsroom, where the Twitter handle was relegated to the intern till it became, one of the most important things that they actually did. But it's
True.
amazing. Didi is on Twitter and it has a slew of new programs on science, startups, which I personally very much enjoy. And HT has actually ventured into new discussions that were typically not mainstream. We're pretty much a part of the whole publication or a Women's Day special, and they actually have a podcast on it. Absolutely amazing things are happening out there. But what has been the audience or viewer reaction, in terms of acceptance of these new initiatives from legacy media? Radhika, you want to go first on that?
sure, Tarun. The thing is, that I really think uh, we need to first understand that people consuming traditional media still remain very far removed from, I think, a majority. I'm taking the liberty of saying, but I think a majority of people that consume news and views on social media, I think there's a demarcation still, though people are, I mean, I'd say the older lot is trying to adapt. So the way the news is consumed is very, very, very different. So the way it needs to be served is also different. The
True.
new generation wants to consume news in quick bites, which led to the emergence of aggregators like an InShots or Daily Hunt, where you get everything together. Uh, so yeah, I think it's really about how people want to consume the things. That's
Right.
how we are also tailoring content. If podcasts are coming, that's because there are people to hear them. If there are videos, if there are short format videos, we've gone from long format to short format because that's the need of the hour. So I think there a lot of tailoring to the consumer demand is happening, which is why also traditional media is in a constantly evolving mode at the current moment.
Absolutely. Anil, how has it been on the television end?
Well, we've this particular pandemic season, or this pandemic years that we've faced, we've got that mix of getting traditional media, traditional shows, the old shows like Ramayana, Mahabharat back on air, and the success that we saw purely in terms of footprints, both in either in terms of those small clips that were circulated, especially on the social media, purely for helped us, especially getting the audience feedback. Not once, I think we've run Ramayana now 5 times during this particular pandemic. Mahabharat has had 4 reruns, and the response that we got, especially on the social media, not from people in India but people abroad, especially people in countries like UAE, Canada, especially people asking us for reruns for it, time and again. When we are halfway into a season of, say, Ramayana, there is a request again back for a rerun. So what it pushed us somewhere to think there is a big market that is existing for it, and that pushed us somewhere to get a new channel altogether in place, called DD Retro, which is a rerun of all the shows that you want to see, as in when in the online space. On the online space, you can go ahead and click the show that you want, you can watch it online on DD Retro, but otherwise DD Retro has a regular streamline of all these shows, all the past shows like 4G, Mahabharat, you name it, Shaktiman, all running, reruns running there. So people who still enjoy those particular, especially getting that mix of staying those old serials, they still have a great opportunity, especially in putting that together. And that's that. And the driver for getting that channel in place very much was social media. The response that social media clearly showed, especially in terms of even when those footprints were there, especially with regards to say a Mahabharata, Ramayana. That was the first experiment that we did with Ramayana. But the Ramayana was such, it had such a great response that we had to push it back on DD National, which is a premium network. The ad slots and the ad prices are very high, but then we were forced to push it there because that particular lockdown, we felt that the audience deserved, or the audience, we had to give it to a larger audience, considering the fact that DD National is still available with an antenna possible at most of the houses. So we clearly gave it out to, though it was at that point of time, purely in terms of revenue, it didn't generate much for us, but clearly in terms of the audience demand and the response that we got, we thought we would simultaneously telecast it on DD National as well as other networks that we had. And clearly it was a big plus for us, purely in terms of, there were huge demands for getting these stars back on air. People wanted to see who these stars were, that they had seen as Ramayana. So we had to get these stars back for a reunion. We had a Ramayana reunion that we played out. We had a Mahabharat reunion. Whatever stars that we could manage to get at that point of time, we managed to put them on air so that audience could somewhere interact with them. And we also had a YouTube as well as a social media page that was created where questions were generated and
Right.
people were asking those questions, and the anchor put these questions for them. So it clearly became, that balance was there very much with the, the older generation as the newer generation connecting with it. Though there have been many other variations of Ramayana and Mahabharata that have been created, I think the old still is very much acceptable and people still enjoy them.
I'm sure you can compare the Ramayana reunion with the Harry Potter reunion, and you'll
Ah.
rate them hand to hand,
Or
right?
the
Well, very
they
true,
don't
very
say it
true.
for nothing, right?
Basically,
Old is gold.
I guess I believe we'll be one of the fewer generations that will actually remember what 4G is, but there are a lot of us. So, well,
True.
we do have the numbers on our side. There's an interesting question that has come up in our Facebook chat today. Uh, when you are talking about, especially so this is great when it comes to entertainment in that space, right, the retro channels, but when it actually comes to news, you are competing with, your startup programs are actually competing with something like a Shark Tank, and there are two very different formats and two very different tonalities that both present. How do
True.
you balance, and Radhika, on the other end also, when it comes to HT having a certain amount of certain kind of tonality, certain kind of journalistic guidelines that they come with, versus a lot of other websites out there, which will pretty much use anything to get that clickbaity, get those clickbait numbers, right? How do you balance it out? How do you decide that this is where we draw the line?
Well, purely from a from a comparison point of view, especially when it comes to startups, we had a program that we had conceptualized and we had started along with the ministry. We did run 1 or 2 episodes of it, and then we turned it into a format of a program. But from a discussion perspective, the response was great because we don't do anything purely in terms of super packaging. Yes, it didn't work the way maybe a Shark Tank would do, but purely in terms of hand holding those particular people, startups who have come up with their ideas, we purely put them in touch with people from the ministry, and clearly people from the ministry are there to handhold them at various aspects, right from the idea to the planning stage to the execution stage. And I think that was a big plus. I think we did start on it with a lot of gung-ho, but there's somewhere deep down, we didn't take it, that particular project, to a logical conclusion when COVID hit us. And it's very much there in the pipeline, purely help, purely that's what the Prime Minister also wants. There is to be a lot of calibration purely in terms of what the ministry proposes and what we need to execute as a national broadcaster. And I think it's very much in the pipeline, maybe mid of 2022 or end of 2022, we'll get that program back on board, where we're going to put a stage together, where we're going to get an idea and we're going to get people from the ministry to come and purely help them out. It's not purely in terms of a deal that you would see in some of the programs that have been put together by private channels, but purely in terms of hand holding. That could be a great opportunity that you would be looking to explore. But as of now, during this particular phase, we have been putting packages together, especially when it comes to startups having success. And we've been putting the success stories, especially to the audiences, so that that seed of entrepreneurship still exists and still grows amongst people. But purely in terms of helping them, hand holding them, just an idea of a success story is always nice to listen. You would listen to it, maybe you would narrate it to a few friends and colleagues, and then you would forget about it. But purely in terms of hand holding, I think that's still one of the initiatives that very much is there, and we put it on the back burner. But I think late 2022 or 2023, that should be very much rolling in terms of a show where we would be actually helping startup companies find their way, especially in these testing times.
No, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. But my question is, how do you draw the line? Where do you draw the line that this is what I will use? That's to hook the viewer in, and this is what I will not do. Are there heated debates that happen in the newsroom? How do you decide this is the line?
See, in today's times, that's very difficult because discussions generally don't last beyond a minute. It generally gets into heated arguments, especially in editorial meetings, because what happens is there is a right, there is a wrong, and the thin line of accepting what is right, what is wrong is very difficult for even bosses today to, come at a point where, all agree. But yes, clearly, at
Absolutely.
most of the times, we try and do the tightrope walking of maintaining balance, but it's very difficult in today's times, especially. There has to be somewhere or the other story that you would see there is a tilt that somewhere we feel the balance has not been kept in mind. But we try and do as much as possible, especially maintaining balance.
Okay. Radhika?
Yeah, I'll start by saying I miss the newsroom, first of all. Where is the physical newsroom? I miss the buzz. But I hope we'll get back there very soon. I hope that day comes soon. But having said that, Tarun, thanks for asking that question, first of all, because somewhere I feel the foundation of journalism itself remains the same. It is about informing, it is about responsible informing, and not misleading. I think that is those are the basics we've learned and continue to work upon those principles in our life. And I think those continue even though we move in a world where clickbaity works. Uh, the choice of uh, remaining I mean, uh, the choice of non-misleading headlines remains upon us, and I think exercising caution there is extremely important. You can be smart with headlines yet not mislead your reader, and I think that will continue to reign supreme uh, going forward as well.
Absolutely. Very nicely answered, though. I must say that. So,
I
when I
hope at
listen,
least it remains there. Hmm.
absolutely. But with headlines getting shorter and shorter, and I think programs wanting to become more snappier, where I think television is also competing with a huge amount of video content that is there on our phones, on social media, on OTT platforms. It's difficult to catch that attention. But listening to both of you, I do understand that this will require new skills, so that a new audience profile stays engaged with you. Does this mean that we will see a hiring spree in the segment?
Well, especially in on our network, there's been a huge increase, especially when it comes to hiring purely on this particular format. The social media, the team that's evolving. Just as you mentioned, earlier as it happened in newsroom, we just had a team that was put in place. But then we realized the power of this particular team, and that particular team getting a lot of attention, especially in this last 2 years. Once the pandemic hit us, and post-pandemic, that's been the the only pressing point where we have actually looked at getting more talent, getting more footprints, getting more counts, especially when it comes to our videos multiply. And I think the focus is very much there. That's what I said. The next election in 2024, this is the space that we're going to fight. Irrespective of the fact, whichever medium that we are in, this is the space that we're going to fight purely in terms of getting attention of the viewers. And I think there has been a huge stress, especially when it comes to getting more manpower and expertise there, in that particular segment. And we always look forward to having more and more people approach us, because our vacancies don't open that frequently, but whenever we open, the stress in the last 2 years has purely been on this particular medium, that's social media.
We have an interesting question related to that. Radhika, I want to address this to you. Do you think
Hmm.
legacy media has a good chance to take over digital media given its deep pockets, vast network, experience, especially when it comes to the fight for talent, like Anil is saying, the opportunities are very few. But when the opportunities do come in, a lot of them would prefer to join, an organization like yours versus a new startup. Uh, so do you think that, legacy media will win over this, especially when it comes to the war for talent?
I think they coexist. To be on the safer side, I think there'll be a lot of coexistence. But at the same time, it's about taking a chance. Like you mentioned at the start, Tarun, I had content at HealthShots, which is in fact a startup within a legacy brand. So it's all about taking your chances. It's all about wanting to take that leap of faith. So I'd say it is at the end of the day going to be a very personal choice for each person who has spent a decade or more or 2 decades with traditional media, and whether that person is willing to take that chance, because it's now or never. I'd say I've jumped on the bandwagon a bit little too late, maybe, but I have, and I'm learning every day. It's a challenge every day, but I'm up for it.
So tell me something. Again, nice question coming in, which talks about when it comes to journalists with over 10+ years of experience who are used to working in a certain standard format, in a certain set guidelines. Is it difficult for them making this transition?
In TV medium, I would say not exactly, because it's an evolving medium. You need to change with the times, and the faster you change, the longer you survive in this medium. Because if you would expect any in Indian markets, it's very difficult, especially to keep changing, because there is somewhere a mental block that many uh, older anchors, or for that matter, people who've been not part of the digital way when it began in 2000, now to get adjusted to the fact that you would have young kids who would walk up to you and say that this is what you said, and see the tweets that you've got with against to the point of difference that the young population, or for that matter people on Twitter had. So, they find it very difficult to adjust, but somewhere deep down, they also understand that, you need to change with the changing times. And the faster you change, the faster you adapt, the faster you're able to transform yourself, the longer shelf life you have on television. And I think people who've been able to understand that have actually survived this particular, tidal waves at various points of times that you've seen in our medium. So if you're ready to change and transform, I think you have a long chance, purely based on the experience that you bring. In today's times, let's suppose an event like prime minister swearing in. So the experience that you have seeing so many prime ministers swearing in ceremony, over the years, somebody who's got an experience purely would speak share out of experience there on that live format, as compared to somebody, who you would train, who would be smart, who would be quirky with regards to the statements. But purely experience helps. But if you're able to use that experience along with transformation with the changing times.
Okay, let me tweak the question a bit for Radhika, right? What was your biggest surprise when you made that shift?
So when I turned to independent journalism, I really went all out and started writing what I wanted to. People I knew who were going to read what, but here now with the digital shift, I find my writing very metrics driven. So that is one huge change because that's the idea of digital. You're constantly chasing users, chasing readers. So that was a huge change for me, adaptability wise. Uh, trying to tweak the way it should be written.
Right.
So yes, that was one of the changes, but it's not all that bad.
Awesome. Anil, what was your biggest surprise?
Well, my biggest surprise, especially, when I moved from private TV channel to the national broadcaster, the style was very different here. Way back in 2004 when I joined them, I still remember the first time I walked into the newsroom, and, we are so used to libraries and footage flowing in directly onto the machines. Here, the first time I landed up in Doordarshan, I realized that you actually have to go and fetch a tape and, play that tape onto the server. And I realized, I said, where did I land myself? Looking at the effort that needed to go before a story. So then I realized it's better to write stories. It forced me to think differently purely in terms of writing a story. Never write a story with the past in mind, because you need to get that footage out from the library, then ingest it, and then get onto the process of doing the story again. So then you change the format of writing, especially the style of writing changed. Write with the present
Right.
and look at the future. Take the stories forward. Don't take the stories anywhere into the past. And if you take the stories into the past, then the process of getting that footage begins. So I wanted to avoid that, and I think it helped me change my style of writing, especially for television, because no longer anything from the past. All history is cut off for me. Look at the future, present stories with a futuristic view, and this is the way for ahead. So it helps you change. Here it was more forced on, but it helps you approach every TV channel very differently. Purely when you see the limitations that any channel has, you got to change according to the limitations that are there before you. And I think that opens doors of opportunities for you, because if you're able to adapt and change quickly, I think it purely it purely somewhere helps you understand how long can you survive in that particular medium and in that particular setup.
And
Absolutely.
just
And
just
sure.
just to add, Tarun, I think it also keeps changing as you change medium after medium. When
True.
I was at a news agency, my focus used to be on breaking news related to my field, on just putting the story out, a verified good story out. Speed used to be one of the things. But when I moved to print, uh, I realized I wasn't thinking visual enough. So that was a huge challenge. And now, when I've moved into digital, I have to think multimedia, which is
True.
again a challenge. I don't just have to think what I want to write, but how I want it to pan out visually in terms of a video, in terms of how I can take it in a podcast form. So I think that's a huge learning curve.
Absolutely, absolutely. And what would it be like when you host your first Twitter chat?
I'm yet to do that.
Well,
When
we
will
do
we
that
see a
on a
Twitter chat?
well, we do that regularly, especially when you have big ticket events happening, purely
Yeah,
in terms of getting up close and center with our audiences, especially on Twitter. And for that matter, even we have podcasts that, that we create, especially on big ticket events like say an India-Pakistan match. So you get a lot of responses, and people keep you on your toes, especially when they realize that purely in terms of an India-Pakistan engagement, you got to be really careful because GD especially in this COVID times, our footprints in Pakistan has increased tremendously. Say from a 62 lakh to almost 82 lakh footprints. Our footprints have increased immensely in Pakistan, also for that matter with other SAARC countries like Nepal and Sri Lanka. So we got to keep all this in mind, especially when we interact with audiences, because that people on the other side of the fence who are also closely watching that particular podcast or that particular interaction with viewers. But it's purely banter is really nice. Because if you tilt anywhere, their feeling is that okay, you're tilting towards one particular team. You got to have it enough. You got
Clear.
to be somewhere right, left, and center. As soon as you deviate, you would get a lot of it. As you wind up your show on Twitter.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you to delve a little bit into the past and help us understand what was the conversation like when you guys proposed for the first Twitter chat, saying that this is
Well,
something we can do.
for our channel, it never existed. Purely from a perspective of taking anything live, especially on a Twitter chat, it never existed. The challenge was immense, especially making the superiors understand with regards to the importance of it. But now we keep that engagement pretty open. Even for our live events, we keep it pretty open, so we immediately get to know whether the response has been good, the response has been bad. It's the first 10 minutes of any live event that you will see where the response, you get a clear cut idea whether the opening has been great, the program is looking good or not. First 10 minutes of any show, especially on Twitter, the response is very much there. And I think slowly people have adjusted to the fact that this is a medium that they need to accept and embrace, and this medium helps get more footprints. And I think that's what we are all striving for, to catch more eyeballs. And I think in
True.
that medium, I think it's been a stumbling block. I would say it's been a speed breaker, but then we are slowly going over it, and now I think we are ready to hit the highway.
He will not give me that answer. For sure. All right, so here's a lesson in diplomacy. Okay, so let's take a few questions from the audience, right? We've got a lot of them popping in. So the first question on the list is, pushing new programming in DD. Is it a challenge or a welcome idea?
Well, it's more a deliberate effort, to push more new programming, especially into the stream, because we purely look at responses that we're getting from the people, especially when we launch any new product, any new program these weeks. And we are all forced somewhere into this kind of matchbox kind of an environment where most of the shows are no longer they're all basically either using some of the other platforms where we link it to audience. So it's more to do with experiences that we're looking at, interacting or getting legends from the game, or for that matter legends or experts in the industry to speak, because it's somewhere we feel that purely in terms of programming not much can be done in today's times, and we look forward to the future, maybe better times. And some of the programming that we're looking at, we're also looking at getting fresh content, especially cross channel promotions purely from our other networks and also from All India Radio. We've been doing a lot of cross channel promotions with All India Radio too, a lot of programs that feature on All India Radio. There is a lot of stress on that. We earlier used to connect with Rajya Sabha TV, and Rajya Sabha TV software used to come for us, and we used to also give our news segments for them. But that particular, cross-channel promotions is clearly the way forward that we look at, purely in terms of not creating fresh software, but creating software where it can be interchanged with all other networks of Prasar Bharati.
More integrated, I guess, right? Okay, so this is a question for both of you. What is your advice for PR professionals who want to pitch a story to you? Radhika, you want to take that up first?
Yeah, I mean, know the platform right first. Yeah, that is one thing. That when you pitch, you should know the platform you're pitching it for and tailor it accordingly. I think that will give you higher chances of converting it from a pitch to a real story.
Awesome.
I think.
Anil?
Tarun, in that particular regard, most of the stories that come our way. Generally what happens is, first of all, let's suppose purely from an event perspective, let me put that first, and then I'll come to the pitch part of it. From an event perspective, right from the bureau chief to 5 people on the same team, all have been sent the same invite. Okay, so now that when you come on the edit meeting, there is a big fight. I'm going, I've got an invite, I've got an invite. So the boss is left confused. He says, boss, either you cover the event or let the event go, because there are 5 invitations and 5 people are ready to go. So most of the time the event gets dropped because there's multiplicity of invitations that have been sent. So half the time the event gets dropped purely, even if it's a good story, it gets dropped. And then we generally wait for a press release to see if it can be adjusted somewhere. So that story goes purely because of multiplicity of invites that are sent on our network. Secondly, from a pitch point of view, most of the pitches that we get, especially for stories from PR agencies, are very much driven with one angle, the client. And then there is no expertise that follows with it. What happens is today's times, especially you need, if there is a client story that you're trying to pitch, you also need an expert from the industry that, if you could arrange to, balance your story out, that helps the story. So most of the times the pitch is generally, okay, this is my client, this is what my client does, and this is the story. So for us, for a network like Doordarshan, it becomes difficult because we need to balance it with something substantial at the end of the day, because we're going to face the RTI. So we need to be really careful of that, because when these kind of stories are pitched, I remember a story that we had pitched about an electric vehicle that promised some 500 kilometers in one charge. So somebody went ahead and did that story, and then we had to face a lot of brickbats for it, because in today's times, I think even Tesla doesn't have a car that can run 500 kilometers with one charge. So those kind of stories generally that are not substantiated with facts, because if you need it to be substantiated with facts, you need to get an expert on board. And today's times, if you're expecting a pitch story to have an expert also for a journalist to search for, I think it's asking too much. If there is a pitch for a valid story, also get an industry expert who's going to vouch that story for you. It makes things simpler, because today's times there is a mad rush to find that space in television. So if you're looking to find that space, you need to get that right balance there. This is the pitch, this is the story, this is the industry expert, and if you want, then it's purely on the journalist to find whatever other angles that he's trying to explore, maybe get the competitors on board. That's a totally different. But purely from a story, simple story structure, a story idea along with the industry expert does wonders for a story to find some space, especially in the television as well as digital media.
Interesting. Okay, I get that, right? So when you're looking at a story structure, it makes sense to have an industry expert along with it. But I'm quite taken aback by 5 invites being sent to you. I know typically there are at least 2 that are sent, because just in case the one person hasn't seen, at least the editor or the bureau chief plus the correspondent is given an invite. And suddenly, because of that, if nobody lands up to it, that's like, like, what do you do?
No,
So
no, I'm not saying nobody would see. What happens is there is a sling fight in the meeting, editorial meeting, when we're discussing a story. There's an invite. In good olden times, the editor had the invite, and the editor would say, "Today there is dinner on the house. We have to go for a press event." And I remember my good old days when we were interns working with Indian Express. The editor in the evening would say, "Finish the page quickly, because I have dinner for you today at a press event." Okay. And today's times, the editor is the last person knowing, okay, there is an invite, because everybody else on the floor is stating he's got that invite. So it becomes a bit of a difficult situation for the editor to manage. And most of the time, the editor says, let it go. Let nobody cover it, because, don't create a scene here. Look at the page and let it go. So that's the big hassle I tell. And I keep telling people from the industry, don't keep pushing invites to everybody. Just because you happen to meet somebody to randomly say on an event, don't push the invite to everybody, because it doesn't help at the end of the day to get that event covered.
So, PR professionals listening to this live session, please don't send more than 2 invites. Two is enough, right? Okay, so another interesting question: how should communication professionals work around a great combination of legacy media and new age media? Radhika, you want to take that up?
Again, like, tailor your content accordingly. Of what everybody has subsections. I mean, people who legacy media is still functioning in traditional media and non-traditional mediums. So please tailor your content to the needs if we are thinking visually, you also need to think visually with us. How can this be presented in a new age manner? Because the language, the tonality changes as well along with it. So, yeah, that would be one thing.
Okay. Anil, would you want to add to that?
Well, Tarun, it's very simple. In today's times, it's not possible to cover every event for you. And, most of the time I keep telling people who call me from the PR agency, many a times we face the crunch of having a shortage of, say, people covering the event from a journalist perspective as well as from a crew perspective. Maybe I would divert crew for a particular event that you're hosting, and then suddenly there is an emergency where that particular crew is suddenly told as he lands up at the gate, that boss, you need to go for another coverage. So what happens is, if you can get the agencies on board, I've been telling that for long, you need to get the agencies on board, let agencies do the coverage part of it. In case there is anything, any kind of question that you will, specifically looking for answers, that could be managed from the PR agency's point of view. That we could tell the PR agencies, this is one particular quote I'm looking for, either from a text point of view or from a video point of view. That is needed more than what is there as a part of the press release. And if that's possible, that works out fine. I think we could take it forward. You don't need that entire jumble of media there to cover a particular event in today's times, because agencies would do it. Agencies would send you a copy, and that should be more than enough. But that's how most of the sporting events today are having their press conferences. These press conferences are all live, and if you want, you
Right.
can ask your questions if there is a need. Most of the time, most of the questions that needed to be answered are generally handled by the team that is doing the live event.
That's a smart way of doing things.
Very
Absolutely.
true.
Radhika, you want to add something to that?
No, I think he has it covered. I mean,
Okay. Another interesting question that's popped up on my chat. The media space, however, while digital medium is looking at growing at a very fast pace, and I think COVID has kind of accelerated that situation. We've spoken like spent a lot and lot of hours speaking about it. But whether we like it or not, the entire media space is still dominated by legacy media. I think there's a huge wave of nostalgia that's also happened that has driven people back to, wanting to have that morning paper with their coffee or look at that news, hear that news program with their morning breakfast. Um, at the same time, on the digital end also, there is a lot of action happening out there. So the question that has come up is, will we see it evening out? Will we see acquisitions happening in this space, and where should we place our bets?
Well, there is a huge likelihood of acquisitions happening in this particular space, purely in terms of, let's suppose, a podcast window that we are looking at, say we don't have much in terms of podcast. And we have not still opened our idea to the fact that, we need to have a regular podcast, especially on a network. So, that could be one area that we could be looking at purely in terms of, at this point of time, no acquisitions, but at this point of time, somewhere content that we are looking at, content generation today's times is most of the big networks, at least in print that I know, most of the big networks are helping some or the other small networks or small independent networks blossom, under their wing. And I think television is still not open to the idea of doing that. Most of the TV channels are not open to the idea of doing that. Help smaller startups mushroom, and finally when they see that it's their worth, or if they manage to catch the eyeballs, absorb them as a part of your regular team. I think print media is more open to the idea. They have started doing it in small chunks in many specialization areas of specialization. Also events, not only specialization but also events in particular. I know of many content that many of my friends generated, especially for events like, say, hockey World Cup, a football World Cup, events in particular, not even the whole bouquet of sports together. But if you are able to create niche content, especially for events, I think print has been very open hearted about taking those with wide arms open. But I think television, still there is a bit of reluctancy when it comes to content that way being generated. But yes, the way ahead could be that, I would say that television needs to open up and see that particular window of opportunity. We cannot create content to that level. I think it's somewhere deep down we need to look at that particular window that's opened up, and if we can accept it and transform along with it, or accept it and move forward, I think it could be a great window to engage.
Absolutely. Radhika, you want to add to that?
I totally agree as far as, companies going niche is concerned. Print seems to be going more niche, even in terms of digital. If you take HD Media with doing radio. Of course, we have that in a big way, and for films, there's a Desi Martini. Even though HT Digital has its own, own film writing, there's
Right.
something called Slurp, and which is on food, and then we have HealthShots, which is on health. So I think, yeah, we're breaking down into more niche segments, and it seems to be reaching fine to people. There are takers who want to consume content in this way. So why not? I think it's a bring it on situation in a lot of cases.
Absolutely. And I see the comparison that both of you are making. The print world has been far more open towards it as compared to television. And that's very noticeable.
But are we left with choice, with any choice? Because newspapers went away in between, so the uncles used to the morning toilet routine with the newspaper completely. What do if you don't adapt to the times? Then what do you do? What else do you do if you're not going to scroll? I have
Yeah.
people in the house who refuse to shift to the smartphone. So you have obstinate uncles who don't want to shift to the smartphone. So either you wait for the newspapers to come and don't budge from what the traditional stuff, or you just move on and take your smartphone and start scrolling away. Yeah.
Well, Tarun,
Absolutely.
just taking that Radhika's view forward, especially for our medium too, we would still in the morning before I go on air at 7 in the morning, I still look forward to the paper wala coming. He would generally come and leave all the newspapers, all the 12 newspapers that I want to look forward to. All the 12 newspapers would be left at the transport department. So by 6:15, if I don't see the papers, I get a bit jittery. Even with my makeup on, I'm still asking paper aaya, paper aaya. So he's like, you are working in a TV medium. How does paper matter to you? I said, I need to look at the front page before I go on air because, generally it gives you an idea. It gives you a spin
Yeah.
that maybe you might have missed, in television we think very differently, and it gives us a much wider canvas, especially print, purely in terms of pointers that we could miss. And I think I look forward to the morning paper, without which I would not read my 7 o'clock bulletin. So sometimes what happens at 6:51 when the paper bundle comes, I'm sitting with the paper bundle on air, flipping through page one, looking at the paper, and then starting off with my headlines. So my producer is like, when you move those papers, that sound is going on air. I said, relax, you got the papers late, it's not my fault. I am going to keep reading the papers till I don't get a sense of, I'm happy with what I'm going to read on air at 7 a.m.
So
Absolutely. Absolutely.
it's a case of old habits die hard, right? My
True.
husband's a sports journalist. He doesn't start his day without the newspaper, and then he gets onto the smartphone. So I'm not saying only old uncles, but even our generation does
True.
the
Very
same.
true.
So yeah.
Yeah, media consumption habits, I think, take some time to change. While I think for a short time, all of us were forced to go online. But I think they will take a generation or two to kind of sift out. There's a very pointed question Mr. Reddy asks for both of you. What do you look for in a story pitch, and how do you select what goes up?
Well, purely, when pitches are made, especially for stories from PR people, we generally look at whether it's relevant in today's times. Especially from a segment point of view. Sometimes, a story would find a place purely because there is a segment. Let's suppose there is a segment in technology today that that there's no story available for us. So that could be an opening that we would be looking at, but it's purely last minute adjustments that we make. And then what happens is if you don't get a technology story from India, we generally go and pick a story from Reuters, and maybe an international story finds a footing there. So most of the times, I would say that no story in today's times, especially in TV medium, no story is useless. Every story has a shelf life or some value. It could be in various formats that we could adjust the story. And what happens is most of the PR guys miss a trick or two because they try to get that visual story on television medium. TV medium has many more avenues, or many more formats where that particular story could be adjusted. Maybe a single line ticker on the ticker band that follows, that could be a great grab for catching an eyeball. But most of the time when I see pitches being made, they always pitch for a television story for television channels. But there are other avenues. We've got a website running, we've got a social media handle running. There could be various windows which could be explored purely in terms of taking that story forward. Most of the pitches are made for TV story. If the TV story doesn't click, then they don't, call back or revert back on the story, and I think that's where the story gets missed. Push that story on some or the other medium, because that's the big window that television has. There are multiple windows that you could push the story for, even on the ticker band. I think it's still value for money if you can get it on the ticker band, or if you can push it on some other format. Push it. There is a window there. It just needs to be explored.
Absolutely, that's very interesting. I don't think a lot of people know about the ticker band. This is
Well, ticker
a
band is that small band that flows below when the news is flowing on the TV screen. So even there are many windows where that could be worked up, because if the story is relevant, that could be taken up there too.
No, I'm saying that a lot of people don't know that you can actually explore the ticker band.
True.
I think that's something that we used to look at because we've been in the industry for over 2 decades now. This is something that we were taught when we went to our first jobs. I don't think people are taught that anymore. That this is
Well,
a new
exactly.
aspect you should look at. Yeah. Radhika, you want to add something to that?
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to pitches, uniqueness really works. Tarun, increasingly, what I see, at least in the health domain, what I am, the kind of pitches that I receive, a lot of generalization happens, which I don't think works in favor of the medium and of the subject. For example, if someone is coming to me with a pitch of cancer, but it's a generic thing where the pitch is about cancer cases have increased in India. It's nothing new. So there has to be some uniqueness to it, some relevance. How should cancer patients maybe cope up in COVID times? I'm saying that just adds a bit of relevance and would grab my attention for me to even turn it into a story. So I think adding that edge to the pitch and not always generalizing is very important. And also, when you make a pitch, you're obviously doing it with some level of preparedness and
Hmm.
knowing the kind of timelines that journalists have on their hand. It would be
Absolutely.
nice to sort of come with a bit of research in terms of what you're pitching instead of coming with a clean slate and saying let's do something, so that something is a huge universe. So yeah,
Okay. So knowing the medium and actually articulating what you would like to explore with that always
and
helps.
offer something unique.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we have three, four very interesting questions. So I'm going to alternate between both of you. We have 10 minutes left, right? So Radhika, this one is for you, uh, by Ashmita. So would you say media consumption habits are keeping print alive?
Of course, I mean,
Yeah. Is
but
that the only thing
and
keeping media?
no, it's not the only thing. I mean, uh, it's very difficult to get something that you used to out of your life unless it's forced, which is what happened when print was not available. But let us not forget that is the reason why paywalls eventually worked for some platforms who came up with it during this time, because people still, even in that digital form that people were getting the papers, they still wanted to read the paper, maybe vis-a-vis going on a website and reading, because that visual, at least that visual feel of the newspaper was there. Otherwise people would just be reading the stories on the website. Why would we need paywalls for a like a print, digital version of the print? So
Absolutely.
I think that feel, I think people in general want to stick on to a sense of nostalgia, and I think print will always remain special, not just as I'm saying from a journalist point of view, but I think like you started the session by saying that a byline remains, I mean, there's nothing as special as that. uh, I think for a user also, that feeling of newspaper is special. So special things
Absolutely.
shouldn't be taken away.
Taran, I'll just take that point a bit forward. Somebody summed it up very nicely for us when we began our career. He said the option between print and TV is very nice. TV is all glamour. Television is just TV is all nice, always on air. Television is just a byline. But remember, a television journalist's life is 10 years shelf life as compared to a print journalist whose shelf life is 20 years. So that sums it up really well. You are there at the moment, yes, but then a print journalist is always remembered for the good work he or she has done. And the longevity that both the careers offer. From a print perspective, from a TV perspective. Print, you can on many occasions look at the live television that television is doing and report on an event, if
True,
need be. Take it.
true.
While television journalists cannot take the liberty of doing something similar, and I think that's where the work pressure, the work. The necessity of being live in a situation at most point of time, somewhere deep down, the glamour part of it is purely there with television, but I think the longevity purely rests with print. And I think that's the choice that one has to make, purely from choosing print journalism over TV journalism, because your lifeline as a TV journalist, there is a shelf life to it, and you somewhere need to know that if you are able to pick new tricks of the trade, especially in this industry, you will have to somewhere move, behind the cameras, and I think that's where the opportunity is. Otherwise, if left to choose between the two, I think I would still go with print journalism. That's much more fun and challenging.
Also,
Okay, I
just
hope your
to
boss is
draw,
not watching this.
just to draw a very simple and popular analogy here, Tarun, it's the same debate as the relevance of theaters and OTT, right? It's the same
True.
thing. You would still go back to the theater when it opens, when you have access, and but it's not that theaters are going to shut altogether. So likewise,
Absolutely.
I said there is scope for coexistence, and that will continue to happen for anything to do with media.
Absolutely. So I'm going to pick up two more questions. Anil, this one is for you. This is from Pooja, how can legacy media and new age media come together to push sports beyond cricket and football?
Well, we've been making a paradigm shift, purely in terms of not only legacy media, even for that matter, private networks have been looking at other windows, not only for from a area of promotion, but also from an area of generating revenue. Look at the new leagues that have come into play. Many leagues that have come into play. Earlier, it used to be cricket dominating almost 90% of the advertisers' money purely on a every season, on a rotating season. And but cricket at that point of time also had a 2 month lull, say from say in May to, for what the matter, April to June, June end, which used to be generally an off season for cricket. So there is no off season for any sport in today's times. And I think other sports have also picked the tricks of the trade, when it comes to multiple leagues that have come into play. And I think we try and, per se, as a national broadcaster, we don't promote any leagues, we stay out of leagues. We don't promote any leagues. That also includes the IPL. We have promoted IPL on in one season in particular where we had a delayed telecast on our sports network. We did try that, but I think per se we stay away from leagues altogether that operate in Indian markets. We generally look at promoting sports and national events or international events on our network. But there is a big window that exists, and I think the way ahead is purely in terms of these leagues. How more and more would bring these teams together, and that could be the big way.
Absolutely. Okay. Radhika, this one is for you. Your top three predictions for new innings of legacy media.
Um, Predictions. I think we're going to go more niche, like we were talking earlier. So I think we legacy media will continue going niche, or will continue focusing more on social media, which is now indispensable to the business.
True.
How we are going to be establishing and reaching out. Um, an evolution, to put it simply, yeah, that is a the forward going approach to how media is shaping up, how any media, whether legacy or new age, you've got to keep up with the times, got to keep up with the technology, which is evolving. In fact, in such a way where it's a chicken and egg situation, and you don't realize whether it's your users demanding, is technology creating the demand, or the demand is creating the technology. So, yeah, I think that
Very
is what.
interesting. Anil, one advice you would like to leave the PR community with today?
Well, purely when it comes to pitching stories, as I mentioned earlier, never give up that opportunity that television, if you're looking at a TV network for a story, there are multiple avenues in today's times, in which the story could find a place. If not the TV news medium per se, you have an online edition, you
Right.
have a web portal, you have social media. There are many places through which that footprint can be found. So you need to understand that a pitch today's times is just not about a TV story. It could be multiple formats. And I think if one is able to encash on that, that's the big window that one should look forward.
Absolutely. And this is a very interesting question that I'll wrap up this session with from Prithvi. How do you consume news personally?
Well, that's a very tricky question to ask. Consuming news, I think that's why we are in the business, because we get the news first, and I think we get the truth somewhere deep down, and we generally sugarcoat it, and present it for our viewers. I think that's the biggest advantage of being in this system, because you get to know the news up front and center, and then purely based on the editorial lines generally that are to be taken, we generally sugarcoat it for our audience. And I think personal consumption, yes, you at least get to know the facts as lead thread bare there. But somewhere deep down, you need to also keep you got to keep consider you got to consider many other elements that are in place. And I think that's where, from a personal consumption, yes, that's why we are in the business, because. But otherwise, I think we generally keep in mind that. It suits all, and that's when all the news that suits all is generally what we pick and present for our audience.
Okay. Radhika, how do you consume news personally?
Two ways: informed scrolling and doom scrolling.
Okay, I'm going to quote you on that.
So yeah, uh, the smartphone, yeah, a lot of it from that.
Yeah,
But Tarun, if I
awesome.
can just last thing, if I can just go back to your question to Anil on your advice for entry level professionals in PR, I'll just add one thing, that public relations is made of two words, and relations is very key to that. So we just work on that. I think rest falls in place automatically. Yeah,
So I
that's
think
all.
Swarnim also got her question answered. Yeah. Thank you so much for taking out the time today for joining us today. I think this was a great session. And I'm sure our
Thank you.
audience enjoyed it as much as all of us did having a discussion on the subject.
Thank you.
I thank you so much, Tarun. Thank you so much, Anil. Uh,
Thank you, Radhika. Thank you, Tarun. Bye
thank
bye. Take care.
Bye.
bye.
Thank you.
Bye, Tarun. Thank you.
So that was Anil and Radhika talking to us about how legacy media has upped its game and it's making a very strong play for new age media and programming. I'm sure you got to, understand a lot of things today, got to know about a lot of interesting initiatives that they're doing. So open up those plans again and see what you can rework. I hope you enjoyed the session as much as we did. If you have more questions, put them in the comment section, tagging the panelists, and they will answer them through the week. This conversation was just a starter. Let's continue to keep the conversation alive on this group. And all our episodes are simulcasted on YouTube, so you can watch it there too. We're also present on Instagram and Twitter under the same handle, PRPOI. Look it up. Let's talk, engage, and learn together and keep learning together. Before we wind up, I will take a moment to thank my co founders, Sonali and Pooja, for driving this forward with me, and Agency Reporter for supporting us on this endeavor to upskill the PR community. Thank you for joining us. Do join us for the next session for another intriguing conversation. We will see you then.